Well, America, we have yet to have the financial conversation, and I will probably take the lead in this for a little bit. Now, these are your rights to know the truths of the system and how the finances work. And if you're looking to use insurance, I will tell you a little bit about insurance-based psychology, diagnostics, and what does that mean for you? And I'll start there. We have referenced the ACE study, the adverse experiences, adverse childhood experiences scale. And it was done in large part by a physician trying to figure out a way of helping with diabetes and but also, as I was reminded by about recently, it was also a insurance informed research to be able to gain information. Now, whether or not this was the intention, I'm not going to quote myself on that, but the outcome is that it gave insurances a clear understanding of the higher the score, the more costly and or the more risky or dangerous the outcomes would be. So people would have a higher percentage of suicide would be the higher the score that they would have on the ACE study. And so the ACE study, I was commenting on how the questions in the ACE study have some things that maybe not a lot of people would have to manage. It goes through general topics, poverty, neglect, abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. But then there was also the one that I felt was, white being the dominant culture for the most part in America, that having a parent being in prison, I guess, you could extend that to somebody being in trouble with the law or having trouble with work. I think that could probably fit into those types of things, absenteeism and stuff like that, which I think is a major factor in the stresses of the changing in the evolution of the family dynamic and the breaking down of the family system, because they're no longer working in the same field together and learning from each other. So the higher the ACE score, the more likely you are to have complications. And America, we've talked about your history, and you have a very high score, if not the highest ever that could ever possibly be, because this is your story. Your history, America, is who you are today, good and bad. Now, your history does follow you. It does become who you are. If you let it. So the ability to record every transaction in banking systems, that's great because you make cents on the dollar. And it's great for government because there's somebody tracking it and they can make sure that they are getting what they believe is their cut about this setup of your money, America. A percentage goes to taxes. Every sale, inheritance, every sale, every exchange, it adds up. Money moving is a good thing in circulation. It's a good thing for people in business. And insurance is a business. They are charging you for things that you may need in the future because they are so expensive that you couldn't afford them otherwise. So you give part of your monthly check either through withdrawal or as a part of your stipend or your contract to be able to have good health insurance. Because people are afraid of losing health insurance, and that's why they will stay in relationships with abusive professional companies or dynamics or around those types of people. And the insurance company can own a stadium. And yet the people who are on the front lines, the doctors and the therapists and the caregivers, the expectation is for us to be altruistic and to be able to capture the moralistic side of things, of helping people and being somebody in that person's life that reminds them of the good things about having a relationship instead of just about getting something done or finished or, being clocked. But in order for there to be an exchange of money, the law and financial institutions have to be involved. And then that means politics, of which, where do insurances fall into this? Well, it becomes a tool, their tool of diagnostics. And I've talked about medical necessity and the irony with medical necessity being that if your level of functioning is high enough to be able to maintain a job, then you typically don't meet the criteria for medical necessity for a large portion of the diagnostics, the diagnoses in the DSM. There are mild grade and rather low standards for diagnostic criteria to be able to have a mild or severe type of case. When we get to the transdiagnostic aspects of trauma, dissociation, and addiction, we can readily see that if we could help with those of which are, from the ACE study, normal, and from, dissociation has been normalized and considered transdiagnostic, meaning that they underlie all other diagnostics in some way. And then my work highlights how addiction is also that transdiagnostic featuring underneath. And I argue that it is the definition of pathology is really the addictive mind, of which we have become addicted to the dissociative state. So the underlying diagnostics are used to be able to bill. The more diagnostics you have later in life insurance looks at that and will adjust accordingly your monthly expense if you choose to do life insurance. Now, that may be a luxury to a large population, and certainly is a privilege to everybody. Now, people have extra money and they want to put it in places, and that may be a good place. Maybe the stock market, maybe into, gold or silver or properties. We have this excess stuff that we have to find a place to put it, because otherwise people will take it, or they'll use it for their own benefit, like banks. You put money into a safe deposit, or, well, not safe deposit, but a fund, and they use it to be able to make more money and to invest in certain businesses, and you get the business world of competition for patents, and you get lawyers who help navigate the business landscape. And so the business landscape within the therapeutics is that an insurance-based system is going to say that you have this long to do this thing that is approved to do on this diagnostic. And I think the clients are pretty readily accepting of that, if all goes well. People want to have a good outcome when they start something. And clinical work can be limited by our ability to create the relationship that we need because of some of the financial barriers that the law, and the law siding with ethics and not morality, errors on the side of caution and fear-based systems of what might happen or what might not happen. And it relates to training. And a key definition between training and education is people who are leading or advancing the field, or are on the front lines, being able to capture innovation as it's happening, be able to feel healing in the room, to be able to taste and touch the changes that are happening in people's lives. That, is an intangible that is a part of the reward that we get as providers. So, using insurance means that it will go on your permanent record, which, if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. Then the other question is, are you diagnosable? Well, the A study said that trauma was normal. So, if trauma is the norm, people who have unresolved trauma and are looking to address trauma may find that the traumas that they have suffered from may not meet the criteria for a traumatic event. And in fact, my clinical experience highlights that most people's clinical processing and the things that really get to them that stay stuck are the things that are not diagnosable, such as developmental traumas and attachment traumas. And I would say some of those fundamentally are tied to systemic and societal advancements in technology. For example, going from breast milk to formula, that would have a consequence, and it may be a positive consequence, such as more babies are able to stay alive, but a negative consequences on health and or population. So you have to take the good with the bad. With this going on some type of permanent record, whether or not you are suffering from a diagnosis or diagnoses, you are experiencing something enough to come and be asking for help. And the things that I do to help are valid in their own right and make sense. My observation is that it doesn't really matter what path you do if all roads lead to quote unquote God. And by God, I would mean that the promised land of what doing the work is going to give you. And I often quote this, it's a Talking Heads song. Take a walk through the valley of the shadow. Take a walk through the peaceful meadow. Don't look so disappointed. It isn't what you were hoped for, isn't it? Or it's not what you were hoping for, isn't it? So when we start a spiritual journey, or really any journey to find ourselves, when we take the risk of trying something to help a identified issue, outcomes are important. And measuring outcomes has already happened. That means your care is timed. And the mainstay of what I've noticed is how dysregulated people are, or how regulated people think they are. And that comes to a balancing act between dissociation and addictions. And the level of addictions that we have as the mainstay of my work is to really recognize what the process is, and to recognize how we don't have it accurately defined. So if we don't have pathology accurately accounted for, the power differentials in the professions really need to be adjusted. And particularly coming out of a COVID world where the underbelly of healthcare was really exposed. And my job as a resource for accurate information and science and research, and really following the evidence. I've written extensively on the difference between qualitative and quantitative knowledge. The quantitative versus qualitative. The qualitative research is in, and quantitative research needs to go to therapy, or go to healing, or go look in the mirror. Needs to be checked. Representative of the insurance, representative of the banking, representative of the politics, representative of the medical model. Psychology is a feminine-based profession in large part. And when we look at the development of children in the development of nations or corporations as people, when we start to look at the pathology of the professions, when we start to see insurance-based psychology of having to diagnose somebody in order for it to get reimbursed because they're already paying a certain amount a month, and their co-pays are something that they pay less on, but they're already paying like $200 and $300, $500,000 a month to be able to pay whatever, a $20, $50 co-fine or no copay. When you really break down your like take-home pay and all the taxes that you pay, all the things that you need in order to be able to maintain a style of life or a level of comfortability or even prestige, how much of that goes into the pot that we all benefit from on some level? We have great power with our money. Where we vote is with our wallets. As much as people will tell you to vote, you vote with your dollar. You also vote with your advocacy. Although the lifestyle that they are selling us is rather convenient. And using insurance means you have somebody documenting each of your diagnostics. They have data of which we have learned time and time again that is not private. It is able to be sold. It is able to be hacked. It is no longer, your stuff is already out there 100 times over. And if somebody, is able to use your identity and do all this stuff online, and it's all digital and it's all make-believe until it happens to you. And then you start waking up to the realities of the system, and you start talking to people who are in the industry, and you find out what the underbelly really is like. Again, like COVID, like big farms, motivations, like how the politicians have no real incentives to do any real regulation because they profit from maintaining the game. In America, you will still be sold red dye 40 and most of your foods. You will have high sugar content and high fructose corn syrup, and those are directly tied to, diabetes or diabetes, which is a fun way of saying it. So while we can have a honest conversation about you using insurance, the bigger picture is you need to be informed as to what that means. Now, my obligation is to my profession and to my ethical boundaries and my moral consciousness, and I could not say this to you, because America, with what you're coming to me with, you're going to be in this process a very long time until you realize that you are doing this to yourself and that your past is catching up to you. And if it doesn't take you over, then you'll be fine. And what I do, America, is I help you heal your past. How long that takes, how prepared you feel, how ready you are, what you're getting yourself into, what it means, what's the purpose, what's the meaning of life, who or what is God. All of these questions can be answered for you by yourself, by taking the journey and taking the trip and taking the path of the wounded healer, as I've come to know it. the line between, sanity and insanity, and courage and stupidity, and, dependence and love, addiction and dissociation and trauma, how these forces play on each other in different forms, different ways. We should be very cautious about having more diagnostics, having more problems that need fixing by somebody who doesn't know necessarily what's really going on, and by professions who, in order to maintain their way of life, need to justify their existence and their reasonings. And there will always be a reason for people to need healers, or to need somebody to talk to, or need advice or insights. But documenting it in a way that allows them to capture our lived experience allows us to capture the truth and the essence and the wisdom and the knowledge base of us all. With what any process of healing offers is the opportunity to know a new normal, and it starts with regulation. And the level of regulation that I go with is neurofeedback. It's a universal language our body speaks, just like music and love. I care about the outcome of your overall care in your life. And that's why I have to be real about the insurance-based psychology that you get involved in when you play with insurances and diagnostics. My job is to be accurate in my diagnostics. And what I know is that developmental and attachment traumas are not diagnoses as of yet. And I caution against them ever becoming that, because that would just mean more power, because that would still be diagnosing normal. And normal has been, researched, and the ACEs study showed us what was normal, and it was trauma and our inability to heal from trauma, because there's no guarantee that people have healed from their trauma. Most of them are living dissociated, which is the mainstay of what I understand in my academic work. And so people are living dissociated, and when they get involved with somebody like myself as a professional or as a caring human being that is looking out for the bigger picture and, common practices that we can all agree upon, there are more factors at play as the outcome becomes dependent upon the length and the level of resistance to change. True change is gradual and sudden. Time is irrelevant and very relevant. And why not now becomes the question of why not do the things that you're supposed to do. Addiction and dissociation is often the answer, which all relate to trauma. We all have this story. We teach on how to heal it. We are an educational approach. We teach about therapy and teach about education and learning and dissociation and trauma and addiction. And these things are universal. They're not necessarily diagnostic or diagnosable and or pathological. What is pathological are insurance companies documenting your private life and the medical model having to do so just so the government can collect its money, and so professions can justify themselves as doing something that is commonly understood to be a mystery in a lot of ways, of which healing is no longer a mystery. But it has been denied by a system that needs to honor those that allow them to do business, the other professions that allow us to exist, their permission to do business, to be here. All have toll booths. All are regulated through a system of checks and balances that are really associations or professions just protecting their own. And when everybody votes in their own self-interest and everybody votes along their industry's lines, and you have industries against, other industries, sure, it breeds competition, but it also breeds an underworld where at some point somebody has to tell you the truth of what it is that we're actually, how we're actually making this much money, how we have this many things, how we have things that we don't need and we buy them anyway. And insurance companies that can own stadiums, they have a business model that seems to be coming equal to like banking and becoming a force a financial powerhouse to be able to pay lobbyists and investment or influence policy and policymakers and lawmakers. And we talk about the free market. We have to be very careful about buying what they're selling us, especially if we don't need it.